Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our latest Ask the Experts webinar, where we will be taking your questions on the topic for today. The topic for today is web development, which essentially covers all the aspects of building, constructing your website so that it is the perfect tool for your marketing. And we're hopeful that today's session will be very helpful for you. We know from our feedback that other earlier sessions we've done on different topics around about SEO, social media, website design, and so on have been helpful. So we're very pleased that you're tuned in to join us here today. I have with me Ben Powell, who's Design and Digital Director, as you'll see written on his screen when he comes up, and Gil Drury, who's SEO and social media specialist. So we have a team of fine people who are able to ensure that your website and your digital marketing is really as effective as it can be, and that you achieve the finest performance you can hope to achieve. With that, I'm going to move on to the first question, because I think we've had a few questions up front from our listeners. And by the way, if you at any point want to ask a question, you'll see there's a little Q&A button at the bottom as usual. So please just click on that and type in your question. And we have a little moderator who will ask them for us. And so our first question is an early one that came through last week, I think. Gil, you have it there, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. So hi, everyone. The first question, and I think this one would be for Mark. Perhaps you can kick off with it. Okay. The question is, what can I be requesting from my developers to ensure the best, what is it?
Longevity, life cycle.
Oh, longevity. Yeah, sorry, that wasn't clear. The best longevity for a website.
Okay, so longevity is actually a difficult one because everybody wants their website to last for as long as possible because they don't want to get involved in the expense of rebuilding too soon and the hassle and aggro of rebuilding too soon. On the other hand, you have to ask if this is a working tool for you. At a certain point, you're going to have to replace it. If you're a kitchen chef and your knives get blunt, you've got to chuck them out and buy some new knives. If you're a racing driver and your car crashes, you've got to buy a new racing car. And so the idea of a website working continuously at its optimum level is really a dream, because what happens is the coding requirements and Google's requirements develop over time, so that you will find that what was optimized at the beginning is harder and harder to optimize over time. You'll also find from a marketing perspective that the market changes, that your position in the market changes, that competitors are undertaking different initiatives to undermine your market position, and you need to be able to respond to all these market changes. And in order to do that, very often you have to start again. So the longevity of your website is dependent as much on market forces as it is on the coding and Google requirements of that you will meet when the website is on the World Wide Web.
Is there any way to estimate how long a website would last for, or is there a strategy of picking the right software or program to use for having the website last longer?
Well, from a marketing perspective, no. If market forces are largely outside your control, therefore you have to respond to market forces. Now, that might give you extra longevity for your website that you hadn't expected. Equally, it might cut short your honeymoon so that you had hoped your website would last for 2 or 3 years, and suddenly 6 months later, some competitor has done something extraordinary and you've got to respond and the only way you can respond is with a new website. In terms of the way it's actually built, I'm not really qualified to comment on that, but I suspect Ben is. What do you think, Ben?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's think of the many different ways you could build a house, for instance. So, you know, frankly, what you really want to do is focus on the importance of how sort of fit for purpose your platform is. You want a platform that's scalable and adaptable, so that as and when the needs of your brand or business demand that your website can accommodate new changes or integrations and adaptations fairly easily without having to constantly reinvent the wheel. That's the utopia, you know, that's the perfect situation where something is built from the ground up that's really fit for future use and scalability.
But presumably if Google change all their algorithms one sort of dark and wintry weekend, and you wake up on Monday morning and find that you're no longer at the top for some reason of the search engine results pages, presumably you may well have to unpick your website and start again.
Potentially, yeah. If you've got a website that is subpar in respect to the demands of certain criteria, you know, Google is an important factor, but it doesn't have the monopoly as far as being a kind of a measure or you know, interrogator of marketing per se. There are lots of other tests and factors that you need to take into account in order to perform well and be effective. So yes, if your website needs to change to satisfy certain important criteria, then that's a sign that it's probably coming towards the end of its life. As I said, the utopia is that you have a system and a platform that's built properly at the outset that will weather some of those unforeseen demands upcoming.
Yeah, and just to interject here, little plug, I think as an agency, it's true to say as an agency, we come across a lot of websites that are built incredibly badly. And we have to quite often start again. And very often the owners of the website say, well, my business is struggling a bit because I'm not getting to the top of Google, or nobody's taking me seriously, or whatever it is. My conversion rate's so low. And really, there's very little we can do with their existing site because it's been so poorly put together in the first place. There's a big temptation, obviously, to buy cheap, but you can't pay for what you get, or rather you get what you pay for.
Indeed, yep, I'll go along with that.
That's not a plug for spending more money, by the way. It's just
well, it's about return on investment.
Yeah,
it's return on investment as well, though. It's about making sure that your investment is spent wisely and having a good life cycle and longevity for your build. It is all about that. But you know, plenty of companies have spent way over the odds, invested way more than they really needed to longer term because they just didn't have the strategic planning in place with respect to their development cycle.
Some of the trends, future trends and forecast with Google say that 5 years or 10 years ahead, website will become less relevant, because what Google tends to do, and is starting to do it in the last couple of years, is to kind of borrow information from websites. So instead of directing people away from Google, Google would like to keep the users using it. So they would bring questions that you've written in your articles into the feed. They tend to bring events and products and bookings. So Google is trying to suck all the different content from different websites. And there are some sort of thinking that this is just the start. And in the future, maybe your website will just be a database friendly for Google to take on the information from you. So yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, we see a lot of that already, don't we, through images?
Yeah, and it's just going to increase.
Geolocation and so on.
Because people don't, an average user, some would want to go into a website and read more in detail, but the first or the initial search is very superficial, and what the user would like to see is all the information laid out in front of them before they decide to kind of explore more and research more in depth. But maybe in the future it will be different.
Google would love us to lock up our doors at Marcom and go and walk into their office and start working for them. But,
yeah. All right. So we got another questions that we got. Lots of discussion internally about using a CMS or a bespoke build for our website. Which one is the best? So either using a CMS, a content management system such as WordPress, or using an alternative, which there are a variety of different other options. Ben?
I think that's a good. I think variety is a good point to make on this, and for both routes there are a lot of choices and a lot of variety. That tends to ensure that products and solutions that are being brought into play vary greatly between different clients. We see it with our own clients, lots of different sort of ecosystems, lots of different platforms, and lots of different, a mix of expertise internally with companies in terms of how familiar they are and what the training demands are for different platforms. It has to be about user activity and end use, both internally and externally, in terms of how sort of fit for purpose a build is. Likewise, there's performance factors and how effective it is in terms of in your mix of assets and tools. I always go back to the fact that a website is a product, it's an asset, an important brand asset and a tool, and it's a product that needs to be seen in that light. So developed from the ground up, as we touched on before, strategically, but also how well can that product be maintained and ensured that it's roadworthy, for the upcoming period, however long your immediate objectives cover. So I think that's the important thing to say. Every solution is different. Every situation is different. You have to be strategically led and solutions focused. That's get the product and the tool that really fits your needs, and ensure that whoever you're working with will scrutinize that process for you carefully, and not just kind of sell you one particular solution that might either wed you to an ecosystem you're unsupported in, or wed you to a solution that is not more broadly supported by a community. Now, it'd be wrong for me at this point not to say WordPress has been the market leader in our kind of era, as it were, for the last 15-20 years. So and something that we used often, but more and more but then we've been there and got the t-shirt with other platforms as well, whether it's ModX or whatever it might be, which was touted as sort of developers platform, because you could kind of create your own system from the ground up to all intents and purposes. But there's also criticisms that are leveled at WordPress for different reasons, because it's not always necessarily the tool suitable for the job. But that's the point, really, is how do you scrutinize that? We're an agency that focus on performance and effectiveness, so we go that extra mile in respect to our aftercare and our kind of work with platforms such as WordPress to ensure that they are, as I said, roadworthy and performance capable for the longer term for our clients. But that really, in all honesty, is the correct approach for whichever system you use. You have to have that additional level of support and interrogation of its worthiness and its performance qualities in order to give it that longevity.
I think it's also true to say that most of our clients at Marcom are SMEs, and they probably don't have their own digital department. So the person who's looking after it is a marketer who is not trained in digital coding, and therefore they need to have a system that they can easily manage and run the website from. So they are non-technical and able to manage a simple dashboard and to input text, new copy, new colors, new pictures, etc., without really any technical requirements on them. But they're not able to do the sort of complex coding that's required in more developer-friendly sites. So the simple CMS is something that a lot of marketers are looking for.
Absolutely, and there's lots of talk at the moment about headless CMS being the future of sort of marketing and comms, where you effectively you have a central database that serves all of your different channels, your website front end being one of them, but it could be a display notice board, a piece of POS, a mobile app, or so it draws all of those front end assets would draw upon a central reserve of data, you know, and present it in real time. So it's quite a dynamic solution. However, it's, as you say, Mark, it's not necessarily a suitable one for, say, an SME that only really needs a high-performing website that's responsive across devices, that in order to meet their marketing demands. Not least the cost of it can be somewhat inhibitive, where you have to develop a front end for every channel. So it really depends. But for a media comms company, it's a great solution, because they, you know, much of their work and their time and the effectiveness of their activity is built around ensuring that they can draw upon a central point of consistent and up-to-date data. You know.
I spoke to one of our developers today in preparation of this webinar, and I've asked him what's the distinction, or when would he build using WordPress, or when he would build something bespoke, so by coding it from the ground up. And his distinction was that if you want something that is design-led, very different design than the normal sort of menu bar on the top and logo and sidebar and the traditional format or framework websites now operate under, he would then go and do a bespoke build, because then you have full control of how the page would look like, where the different elements would be. Whilst using WordPress, you can really customize it and make it your own, but it's still kind of tied up to a general framework that if you want to manipulate it too much, you might affect some of the it might not be as fast, or it might be other issues that come up. So that was his distinction, but it was just interesting to ask.
Yeah, we've produced a lot of WordPress products, and very often they are bespoke to a degree, because, as you say, the client's needs and the needs of the product, as it were, are you know, need to be unique or distinct in some way. We talked a bit about it in our web design series, about how, you know, whether to use off-the-shelf theme framework, or whether to build, say, using custom templates in your own kind of vanilla framework, and custom fields, etc. So yeah, in development terms, you know, all of these platforms should accommodate some flexibility, adaptability, and the ability to be creative in the solution. As soon as you hit restrictions, you need to interrogate, you know, whether that's going to upset the apple cart, as it were.
Great, thank you. So we got another question here. Our website performs consistently poorly in SEO audits. What can we do to develop a website as it is? So I can answer this, SEO. The question is, what would someone do if their current website is poorly performing on SEO? Would they need could they optimize it or develop it, or would they alternatively need to build a brand new website? And this is kind of connected to all the other the topics that we've covered. It depends what is your requirements and what do you need. If Google is one of your main sort of income streams, or where users come to your website, you need to make sure that your website is utmost friendly to Google. If a developer will come and look at your website and say, I can then update it and change a few things and make sure that it works really well on search, then you're good. You don't need to go and make too drastic changes. But however, if you use an old system, a framework, or a theme that is very restrictive, and it makes the website slow, which Google doesn't like, or there's other issues with it, then we would probably suggest going through and rebuilding the site. So you could be either take what you've got, make it look the same, but just changing the back end and make sure it's up to date, or take the opportunity to make sure it's a very effective website with good landing pages and bring some of the strategy into it rather than just changing the tech at the background.
Yeah, a lot of people approach us asking us to what they call reskin the website. Some of us keep the back end, but just change the graphics and the content. And very often that's not a good idea, because Google's requirements are such that if you're not completely up to date with your platform, then you're not really going to achieve very much. And okay, you end up with a nice, shiny looking, new looking website, but it may not perform well for you. On the other hand, if you've got something like a WordPress platform and you've been keeping it up to date, maintaining it and updating plugins, etc., it could be okay. I mean, each case on its own merits.
Yeah, agreed. And it's true, as we touched on in the first point, that all brands are now expected to be content creators and curators of their own story, and ambassadors, guardians of their own story and content, and that is increasing all the time. And Google is looking for ways to differentiate between who is the best content maker. You have many more large percentage of brands, businesses now working very hard to produce very high quality content. So Google needs to be able to determine. So now we've entered in, and now we're entering into an era where high speed internet and and new technologies are really pushing the boundaries of what digital experiences mean. Google Web Vitals has come in to become the the de facto kind of set of performance markers, really, to ensure that SEO can be judged and measured to the benefit of the end user, which I personally am in agreement that's very important. That the websites can be judged on a set of other factors as well. So that really ties in closely with web development and the long-term success of SEO.
Yeah, that was a good analogy. I guess if you have an old car that that doesn't drive very fast and can't do what a brand new car could do, and then you have a new Tesla that it's autonomous and can go through the motorway with its own cameras without the driver assisting, then Google would prefer showing the brand new website that is going really fast. It's got up-to-date content. It's got all the different tools that a new website would have versus an old wreck like Mark's.
We need a picture pop up on the screen.
We need a pop up. We'll add it in the edit.
We'll add it in the blog. Yeah.
Okay, and we got one more question. It's about Google Web Vitals, Ben, that you just mentioned. So we've been approached by many companies about Google Web Vitals, and it's true, we've been getting also asked a lot of emails about it from different contacts. Is it vital to planning a rebuild of our own website, or can you update your current one?
I see. Okay, really rebuild or update. Yeah, well, that's the perpetual question: rebuild or update. And as we said at the start, if you're lucky, you've got a website you can update, because that's important. As obviously you hit this wall, you don't want to have to necessarily feel like you've got your arm tied behind your back and you're going to have to rebuild the website. But as Mark said, there's lots of other reasons as to why you would do that. And likewise, there are many other reasons outside Google Web Vitals, which is having its day in the sun at the moment, as to why you would approach a web development project, rebuild or otherwise, in a specific way. And I suppose that's it, really. You need to look at it in the round. We go back to what we said at the outset. You need to be strategically led and you need to be solutions focused. So if Google Web Vitals and high speed performance of your website is identified as an important factor, where either you've been lacking previously, or search engine visibility and SEO generally, and search engine marketing is becoming more important in your cycle and your marketing cycle. I see this is from Amy, who's in event marketing. So as marketers ourselves, predominantly, we understand how the demands of how the demands of marketing, I should say, changes in marketing, and company objectives, brand objectives change all the time and demand more of their brand assets. So in short, because we could go into a very detailed technical conversation about Google Web Vitals, which would put everyone to sleep, they are an important factor to consider. And yes, you must consider it alongside all the other many factors that form part of a strategy.
Okay.
Has anyone got anything to add to that one?
Has anyone else put up any more questions? I haven't seen any pop up in the last couple of minutes.
I think no, I think we ran out of questions people have asked in advance. There's a few. Let's have a quick look.
Okay, well, no, there's none on the Q&A. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. And we look forward, I hope you've learned something. Actually, it's been quite interesting talking about it too. And so I hope you'll join us for our next webinar, which will be in a month's time. And we'll be putting information out about it on social media and writing to all our database about it. So look forward to seeing some or all of you again next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.